Week, David's kindness to Mephibosheth, and I thought that's a very what you call a type of Christ right there, showing mercy to somebody who needed to have mercy showed to him, and that was Christ-like right there, what he did. This week, we'll just start off in chapter 10, verse 1. It says, "After this, the king of the Ammonites died, and Hanun his son reigned in his place. And David said, I will deal loyally with Hanun, the son of Nahash, as his father dealt loyally with me." Now, y'all remember who the Ammonites were? They were some of the progeny of Lot and his daughters, Ammon and Moab. And since Israel had been there, they'd always been natural enemies. They couldn't get along, even though they were actually sort of kin. But this has been going on for a long, long, long time. Many generations. But he's saying his father dealt loyally with me. Now he's gone. I'm going to get together with his son. So David sent by his servants to console him concerning his father. And David's servants came into the land of the Ammonites, but the princes of the Ammonites said to Hanun their lord, "Do you think because David has sent comforters to you that he is honoring your father? Has not David sent his servants to you to search the city and spy it out and overthrow it?" So Hanun took David's servants and shaved off half the beard of each and cut off their garments in the middle at the hips and sent them away. This is a terrible, terrible dishonor. You know, the men back then, they were going to wear full beards. I mean, that was just the way it was. And they had half of them cut off, so, they were totally messed up, Half of it off and half of it on. What do? You cut the rest of it off and wait the rest to grow back, or what do you do? But also, what's even worse, I think the King James implies that their garments were just cut off on their behinds, so their butts were open. And, they didn't go around carrying an extra set of clothes in their fancy rolling suitcases. They didn't have that kind of stuff. So they were in a mess. They were greatly ashamed. And David sent to meet them and said, "Remain at Jericho until your beards have grown and then return." So he sent them to Jericho where they could kind of recover from all that shame. And then when the Ammonites saw that they had become a stench to David, the Ammonites sent and hired the Syrians of Beth Rahab, and the Syrians of Zobah, 20,000 foot soldiers, and the king of Makkah with 1,000 men, and the men of Tob, 12,000 men. And when David heard of it, he sent Joab and all the host of the mighty men. And the Ammonites came out and drew up in battle array at the entrance of the gate, and the Syrians of Zobah and Rahab and the men of Tob and Makkah were by themselves in the open country. When Joab saw that the battle was set against him both in the front and in the rear, he chose some of the best men of Israel and arrayed them against the Syrians. The rest of the men he put in charge of Abishai his brother, and he arrayed them against the Ammonites. And he said, "If the Syrians are too strong for me, then you shall help me. But if the Ammonites are too strong for you, then I will come and help you. Be of good courage, and let us be courageous for our people and for the cities of God, and may the Lord do what seems good to him." So Joab and the people who were with him drew near to the battle against the Syrians, and they fled before him. And when the Ammonites saw that the Syrians fled, they likewise fled before Abishai and entered the city. Then Joab returned from fighting against the Ammonites and came to Jerusalem. But when the Syrians saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they gathered themselves together. Before we go on, I just want something right here that Joab said that really stuck out to me. He's talking about, if they're too strong for me, then you come help me. If they're too strong for you, I'll come help you. And he says, be of good courage, let us be courageous for our people and the cities of our God, and may the Lord do what seems good to him. And so that was courageous right there. That was showing courage. He was saying, no matter what happens, the Lord's going to be in control of whatever it is, but let's just leave it in his hands, and here's what we do. And it kind of reminds me of what Esther said that time. When she decided to stand up to the king, she made up her mind that she was gonna make her petition for the king. And that was dangerous. You just didn't walk into the presence of the king back in those days. It could get you killed. And she said, I'm going to do this, for the people of Israel, and if I die, I die. And that's that same kind of courage, going out and doing it, and just saying, well, if it don't work out good for me and I wind up, in a bad situation, so be it. They're still going to do what the Lord wants them to do and serve God no matter what happens. That's the kind of attitude we all need to have too. We're going to do whatever it takes. And he goes on to say, Hadadezer, the king of the Syrians, I don't know how to pronounce that. That's about the best I can do. He brought out the Syrians who were beyond the Euphrates. So this was the Assyrian Empire. It was spread out a long ways over into across the Euphrates River. They came to Helam with Shobach, the commander of the army of Hadadezer, at their head. And when it was told David, he gathered all Israel together and crossed the Jordan and came to Helam. The Syrians arrayed themselves against David and fought with him, and the Syrians fled before Israel. And David killed all the Syrians, the men of 700 chariots and 40,000 horsemen, and wounded Shobach, the commander of their army, so that he died there. And when all the kings who were servants of Hadadezer saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they made peace with Israel and became subject to them. So the Syrians were afraid to save the Ammonites anymore. So I think right there, you kind of come to the peak of David's kingdom. He had done conquered the Syrians. He had conquered the Ammonites. God had given him victory everywhere he had went. So he's at the pinnacle of his conquest right now. And God has been through him with all of this. God has helped him. And what happens sometimes when we get to the peak, sometimes it starts turning the other way, don't it? Look what I did. Yeah, look what I did. Call me Mr. Wonderful. But and that's going to show up this next chapter. It starts going bad for him. God had given him a lot of great things, but he had done some wonderful things. David had done some wonderful things, and the people loved him. But here's where he come into his worst, in my opinion, his worst and deepest sin. Although there were others, this is the one that everybody remembers the most. But in chapter 11, it says, in the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem. You see what's happened right here? It says this is the time when the kings go out to battle. King didn't go to battle. He stayed home and sent his generals out there so he could lounge. It happened late one afternoon when David arose from his couch. He'd been taking him a nice nap, and he was walking on the roof of the king's house, that he saw from the roof a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful. That wasn't very uncommon back then. It sounds a little weird now, but you get away from the heat up there, and the wind blowing. People would go on the roofs. and the woman was very beautiful. And David sent and inquired about the woman. And one said, Is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? So David sent messengers and took her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. Now she had been purifying herself from her uncleanness. Then she returned to her house, and the woman conceived, and she sent and told David, I am pregnant. You know, there's a lot of unanswered questions about this, and even right now, I see people, Christian people, arguing about what exactly happened right here. People ask, well, what was she up on the roof? Why wouldn't she, have a curtain around her somewhere? Wouldn't nobody see her? I don't know. I can't answer that question. And some people say that David basically raped her because there was no, you don't,
Consent.
huh?
No consent.
Yeah, because now I don't know if that's true. It don't say, but some people are convinced he did because she don't really have any. It was hard to refuse the king like that. So I don't know. Any way you look at it, any way you want to look at it, there was sin involved, and both of them wound up paying the price for it.
And we mess up when we assume.
Huh? Oh yeah, that's right. But anyhow, she's pregnant. So David sent word to Joab, send me Uriah the Hittite. And Joab sent Uriah to David. Now see, Uriah, he wasn't even a Jew. He was a Hittite. He came from north of Israel up there. That country was north of them, up close to Turkey. And when Uriah came to him, David asked how Joab was doing and how the people were doing and how the war was going. So see, David's continuing in a sin. He's kind of acting like a serpent right here, asking him all these questions like he's concerned, about him. He had an ulterior motive this whole time. And he said, then David said to Uriah, go down to your house and wash your feet. And Uriah went out of the king's house, and there followed him a present from the king. But Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all the servants of his lord, and did not go down to his house. When they told David, Uriah did not go down to his house, David said to Uriah, have you not come from a journey? Why did you not go down to your house? Uriah said to David, the ark and Israel and Judah dwell in booths, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in the open field. Shall I then go to my house to eat and drink and lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul lives, I will not do this thing. Now that wasn't an arrow straight to the heart of David right then. This man, he was so faithful to David and to his fellow warriors that there was no way he was going to go home. He just couldn't see himself doing that. He was an honorable man. And then David said to Uriah, remain here today also, and tomorrow I will send you back. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. And David invited him, and he ate in the presence and drank, so that he made him drunk. He got Uriah drunk. And in the evening he went to lie on his couch with the servants of his Lord, but he did not go down to his house. I tell you what, that's some championship quality leading right there. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. In the letter he wrote, set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting, and then draw back from him that he may be struck down and die. Wow. That's what you call premeditated murder right there. That's exactly what that was. And the men of the city, and as Joab was besieging the city, he assigned Uriah to the place where he knew there were valiant men. And the men of the city came out and fought with Joab, and some of the servants of David among the people fell. Uriah the Hittite also died. Then Joab sent and told David all the news about the fighting. And he instructed the messenger, when you have finished telling all the news about the fighting to the king, then if the king's anger rises, and if he says to you, why did you go so near the city to fight? Did you not know that they would shoot from the wall? Who killed Abimelech, the son of Jerubbesheth? Did not a woman cast an upper millstone on him from the wall so that he died at Thebez? Why did you go so near the wall? Then you shall say, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. So even David knew that was not some strategy you did. You didn't crowd up there under the wall where they could shoot down on you or throw things on you. But he had commanded Joab to send them up there close, in the most dangerous place in the fight, where they were most vulnerable. So the messenger went and came and told David all that Joab had sent him to tell. The messenger said to David, the men gained an advantage over us and came out against us in the field, and we drove them back to the entrance of the gate. Then the archers shot at your servants from the wall. Some of the king's servants are dead, and your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. David said to the messenger, thus you shall say to Joab, do not let this matter displease you, for the sword devours now one and now another. Strengthen your attack against the city and overthrow it, and encourage him. When the wife of Uriah heard that Uriah, her husband, was dead, she lamented over her husband. And when the mourning was over, David sent and brought her to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. That's that's a bad sentence right there that just gives you a bad feeling. The thing David had done had displeased the Lord. That just shows right there. How many times when we do things that we know are not right, do we realize and understand, what we've done is just displeased the Lord? That's a dangerous place to be in.
Adultery and murder, God forbid.
Yep.
We don't do anything in secret.
Sir?
We don't do anything in secret.
No. No, I mean, all of us at some time we think, well, we don't even think God pays attention sometimes. But nothing we do, no decision we make, whatever we do, God knows about it. And it said this particular thing displeased the Lord. But nothing happened right that moment. And that's often like us too, we think we got away with something.
I wonder what Joab was thinking.
Yeah.
What David was doing.
Yeah, I mean, why was he singling out this one man right here? But Joab, he was just like a soldier, I'm going to do whatever he tells me to do. Yep. But Uriah was faithful and loyal too, more than both of them.
Joab, you questioned everything that David did to you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Could it be too?
That's right. That's right. And then it says, the Lord sent Nathan to David. He came up to him and said to him, there were two men in a certain city, the one rich and the other poor. The rich man had very many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing but one little ewe lamb, which he had bought. And he brought it up, and it grew up with him and his children. It used to eat of his morsel and drink from his cup and lie in his arms, and it was like a daughter to him. It was a pet, like our pets. Now there came a traveler to the rich man, and he was unwilling to take one of his own flock or herd to prepare for the guest who had come to him. But he took the poor man's lamb and prepared it for the man that had come to him. Then David's anger was greatly kindled against the man. And he said to Nathan, as the Lord lives, the man who has done this deserves to die. And he shall restore the lamb fourfold because he did this thing, and because he had no pity. And then here come the words that I can imagine just all the blood left David's face. Nathan said to David, "You are the man. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you out of the hand of Saul. And I gave you your master's house and your master's wives into your arms, and gave you the house of Israel and Judah. And if this were too little, I would add to you as much more. Why have you despised the word of the Lord to do what is evil in his sight? You have struck down Uriah the Hittite with a sword, and have taken his wife to be your wife, and have killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Now therefore the sword will never depart from your house." And this is true. David had done reached his pinnacle, and no matter what he did after this, there were always going to be trouble. He had trouble with his children and his family. From then on, it was rough. Now therefore the sword shall never depart from your house, because you have despised me, and have taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife. Thus says the Lord, behold, I will raise up evil against you out of your own house, and I will take your wives before your eyes and give them to your neighbor, and he shall lie with your wives in the sight of this sun. For you did it secretly, but I will do this thing before all Israel and before the sun. Now this is always how David was different from Saul. So when all this is said by Nathan, David said, "I have sinned against the Lord." He knew immediately what to do. You know, it was time to repent. He'd been quiet and thought he had gotten away with it, but when he was finally confronted, that was tough. That was, David immediately repented. And Nathan said to David, "The Lord also has put away your sin. You shall not die. Nevertheless, because of this deed, you have utterly scorned the Lord, and the child who is born to you shall die." Then Nathan went to his house. So Nathan, who had been the prophet of the Lord for David for so long, he had to go and tell him a hard thing. And I heard a preacher on TV. In fact, it was Chuck Swindoll one time. I don't know if y'all know who he is, but I was listening to him one time. I had a hard thing to do. I had to go confront a friend of mine about a problem he had. It was an alcohol problem. And
You talking to me?
no, his daughter had asked me would I talk to him, because he had been clean for years and years and years. She said he's secretly drinking, and he's a quiet guy, and he kept to himself, you know, and he wasn't going out to the bars or nothing like that, but he kept alcohol with him all the time in his truck, you know, and he was always drinking. So anyhow, she told me all this, and she was begging me to go say something to him, to talk to him. So I didn't particularly like the idea all that much. That's a hard thing to do, but I finally said, okay, I said, you pray with me, and I'll go do it. So I set up a cooking. I was gonna come up there and cook some fish or something like that, but I wanted it to just be me and him, you know, so we could talk. And I know, you know, he likes to eat, so I figured that was the best way to do it. So we went up there. I went up there to his barn and cooked and everything, and got to talking to him. And anyhow, I finally did it, and he accepted it. As far as I know, he ain't ever drunk anything since. But the thing about it, when I was on the way, I was riding that morning, boy, I was praying. And I turned on the radio, and Chuck Colson was preaching about this very thing right here. And this is how I got confirmation that I was doing the right thing. Chuck Colson said, sometimes you have to confront the people you love. He said, and that's the only way you can help them. You can't just, you know, always just let it slide and ignore it. But I won't, that's why I'll never forget these scriptures right here. You know, sometimes you have to do that hard thing. And I suspect Nathan, before he went in there, to see the king, he didn't know how David was going to react. And this guy I'm talking about, he was a big guy, strong guy, and he could have probably broke me in half if he'd wanted to. But he listened. And David knew immediately he had to do something different. But Nathan told him this, and he told him what the consequences were, and every bit of it come true. But it says then, then Nathan went to his house in verse 15. And the Lord afflicted the child that Uriah's wife bore to David, and he became sick. David therefore sought God on behalf of the child. And David fasted and went in and lay all night on the ground. And the elders of his house stood beside him to raise him from the ground, but he would not, nor did he eat food with them. On the seventh day the child died. And the servants of David were afraid to tell him that the child was dead, for they said, Behold, while the child was yet alive, we spoke to him, and he did not listen to us. How then can we say to him, the child is dead? He may do himself some harm. But when David saw that his servants were whispering together, David understood that the child was dead. And David said to his servants, Is the child dead? And they said, He is dead. Then David arose from the earth and washed and anointed himself and changed his clothes. And he went into the house of the Lord and worshipped. He then went to his own house, and when he asked, they set food before him, and he ate. Then his servants said to him, What is this thing that you have done? You fasted and wept to the child while he was alive, but when the child died, you arose and ate food. He said, While the child was alive, I fasted and wept, for I said, Who knows whether the Lord will be gracious to me, that the child may live? But now he is dead. Why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I shall go to him, but he will not return to me. See, this is one of the verses I use, when people talk about babies dying, where do they go? I understand y'all say you had a pastor one time that didn't believe babies went to heaven, which I can't possibly imagine. But I've heard it. I've heard that said, yeah. But I think that's your showing up really hyper Calvinist. How can you say that? I just don't get it. But David said right here, I'll go to him, but he can't come back to me anymore. So.
It goes back to the sin nature. We're all born with a sin nature, and that little child didn't have time to repent.
Yeah, but when it comes to that, only God knows. And with all this, I know people sometimes think, with the fact that God sends people to hell, that makes him unfair. That's not the truth at all. God is absolutely fair. He's so great. He just ain't gonna let a child like that. They're
That's probably when it works. Like an unborn child, that child dies, never had a chance to not sin in the first place.
Yeah.
So what about that child?
Yeah.
Just so many problems with that theology.
Oh yeah. But I just go by, David said, can I bring him back? He says, I shall go to him, but he will not return to me. And so I believe David and his son are reunited in heaven.
Amen.
But during all this time, it says, David comforted his wife, Bathsheba, and went in to her and lay with her, and she bore a son. And he called his name Solomon. And the Lord loved him and sent a message by Nathan the prophet. So he called his name Jedediah because of the Lord. Jedediah, beloved of the Lord. So David, he lost his son, and in the long term, he lost a lot of other sons also, which we'll get into at a later time, because he had a lot of sons that were not godly men. some of his grandsons would just really bring the downfall of Israel before it was over too. Now Joab fought against Rabbah of the Ammonites and took the royal city. So he could do all this now because they had defeated the Assyrians and they weren't protecting the Ammonites anymore. So he was paying them back. And Joab sent messengers to David and said, I have fought against Rabbah. Moreover, I have taken the city of waters. Now then, gather the rest of the people together and encamp against the city and take it, lest I take the city and it be called by my name. So David gathered all the people together and went to Rabbah and fought against it and took it. And he took the crown of their king from his head. The weight of it was a talent of gold, and in it was a precious stone, and it was placed on David's head. And he brought out the spoil of the city, a very great amount. And he brought out the people who were in it and set them to labor with saws and iron picks and iron axes, and made them toil at the brick kilns. And thus he did to all the cities of the Ammonites. Then David and all the people returned to Jerusalem. That's as far as we're going to go tonight. But y'all got anything that sticks out to you that you want to talk about?
It's amazing the forgiveness of God.
Oh yeah. You know, you think about it. God forgave him of murder and adultery, you know.
You know, you was talking about telling your friend that it falls under love your neighbor as
Yeah.
yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And enough to tell them the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a big predicament for me. Man, I struggled over that for days and days and days before I could do it.
When I first got sober, I wanted to scan the lake.
Yeah.
I wanted to tell everybody. If you want to get sober, just come, let me tell you what God did for me.
Yeah.
I went around knocking on doors.
Uh-huh.
People I knew that were alcoholics. Some of them responded.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, this guy here, he was very secretive about it. You know,
Yeah.
I guess he's really kind of a loner. But you know, his daughter had figured out what was going on, and you know, that was a tough thing to do, but he handled it well. You know, I kind of figured he was going to say, you need to leave here and mind your own business, you know, but he didn't do it. He admitted it. And good things happened from it. But, you know, sometimes, just like the man said on the radio, said, sometimes you have to confront the ones you love. He said, and I knew right then when I was listening to that, I won't ever forget it. I was in my truck and I was riding. I was in Columbia, Alabama, on the way to go see him, and I heard that, and it just like the Lord spoke to me and said, here's your sign. You doing the right thing. That was one of them God moments. Of course, it didn't make it any easier right then at the time. But everything worked out. Nobody came over. It was just me and him. Anybody else have anything?
Do we know what the child's name was at that?
No, I don't.
Never said.
Or how old it was.
I don't think he was a.
About 7, 8.
I don't think he was very old at all.
The child we were talking about with that pastor, that was a stillborn child.
With who?
The pastor we were talking about,
Oh,
child,
yeah.
that was a stillborn child.
Mhm.
He certainly had no opportunity to sin or
No.
do anything.
Yeah. 7 days old.
That was a common thing back in the old days for babies to die like that, though. As sad as it is. I mean, you ever go perusing some of these old cemeteries? I know Brenda hates to do it. But you go to perusing these old cemeteries, you'll see baby after baby after baby. And a lot of times you'll see the mama there too. I like to go looking through them. Brenda don't much care for it, but I like to look. You do too?
We did up in New York, we went to old cemeteries that would come along and, man.
Yeah.
It's something.
Yeah, we were in when I was deer hunting one time up in Clay County, we was looking through an old cemetery at a church, an old church sitting there. And we looked through the cemetery and we came up on one where the man was born in the 1700s. And he'd been dead there. He was in his 90s when he died, so it was like the 1880s or something like that.
My daddy didn't get named till he was 3 months old. And he was the 11th, there were 12 kids in his family. He was the 11th child, and they just said, bring me the baby. They said, bring me the baby. They named him when he was 3 months old.
Oh, they had to think about it a while, huh?
His name was Eugene Rock.
Did they give him a middle name or
That
just Eugene?
Eugene,
Eugene.
no middle name.
Let's just keep it simple.
Yeah, 12 youngins. They just said, bring me the baby.
All right now.
Yeah, called him Eugene.
Well,
Lots.
lots.
But it wasn't the. Was it those lots? Yeah.